Okay, so this morning at breakfast, Lisa showed me or read to me an article from the FT, the Financial Times, which is a fantastic newspaper if you haven't read it. And it was so interesting in terms of our own video business that I thought I would just take a minute live here to share this with you, because the real interesting part here is about the enormous potential for everyone having their own television station, which may seem nuts in some ways, but that's really where the technology is taking us. So let me just grab the FT here for a second. This is actually from the weekend FT. I think she likes to save it to read over breakfast. And it's a terrific paper. So the article, the headline is, it's a little piece, and of course I'm going to be backward because of Facebook's video stuff. The headline is NBCU tunes into digital with $500 million swap on Snapchat. Stock. Snapchat, as you know, went public a couple of days ago. And NBC, which is Universal, which is Comcast, which is pretty much a lot, put $500 million into it. And the reason they did that was that I'm not going to read you the hard arc, I'll just give you the general gist of the thing. The reason is the NBC is moving, apparently fairly rapidly, out of traditional linear broadcast and looking to occupy space in the non-linear digital world. NBC's also invested $400 million in BuzzFeed, $200 million in Vox, acquired Sports Engine, blah, 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 became a majority owner of Awesomeness TV. If you're not familiar with that, you should take a look at it. That's the YouTube channel, first bought by DreamWorks and then resold. Awesomeness TV, by the way, which is TV, it's made by kids. That went from a valuation of $33 million to a valuation of about $800 million last year, when Verizon took a 25% share in it. So all these guys are moving out of the linear television conventional broadcast space and into the digital space. I thought the most interesting paragraph, and the reason that made me want to do this morning, was it said, the digital expansion comes as the owner of NBC, CNBC, and Bravo has trimmed its roster of TV networks. It shut its crime-themed channel Clue last month. That's where I used to watch Law and Order. And last month, and in January, turned the Esquire network, a joint venture with Hearst, into a digital-only offering. These guys are getting out of the linear cable business, and they're getting out of it with a reason, because linear cable, which was once revolutionary in the 1980s, is basically dead. And the reason it's dead is because the technology has moved on. Linear cable, of course, you have to watch it. It's on 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And increasingly, of course, we're all used to video on demand and watching things when we want to watch it, which is fine. So, the instinctive thing here might be, well, I'm going to buy stock in Comcast because obviously they know what they're doing. But there's a much more interesting point that's being made here. The barrier to entry in the digital video world is non-existent. If you wanted to start a cable channel, and we've built a couple of cable channels for some people, and we've sold some of them, and it was a good business some time ago. If you wanted to own a cable channel, first you got to start with about $500 million just to buy the space before you even start producing anything, and then second, you have to make a deal with places like Comcast or Time Warner, or these MSOs that essentially own the wires that go into your house, and they will only put certain channels on their cable system that they think people want to watch. And of course, there's an interesting contractual relationship there. If you're really interested, our friend Pat Baldwin can explain this in much greater detail than I. But this is a limited environment. So you and I could not have a cable channel unless we had $500 million to $1 billion to pony up. But these channels like Awesomeness TV, anybody can start one of these things, and that's what makes this so interesting. The barrier to entry for starting and owning your own online digital network is nil. Essentially, I'm broadcasting here. I'm only broadcasting to a handful of people, but this is all the technology it takes to actually start your own channel. And as you can see, the interesting part here, the really interesting thing here, is that as these traditional broadcasters start to regroup themselves and look for new places to go, they could launch their own channels, but in the normal corporate world, they're much more interested in acquiring existing systems, digital networks, that don't even have to make a profit. The Snapchat is the classic example. It lost $500 million in the last quarter and still has a valuation of about $34 billion today. So the fact is that anyone can launch their own channel now. It used to be when we broadcast through the air, the electromagnetic spectrum limited the number of channels. And when I was a kid, I'm pretty old now, but you had a TV and you changed the channel like this, and there were basically 3 networks and 5 local stations and WPIX and stuff like that. And that's all there was. And that's because that's all the space you had in the air to push through these electromagnetic waves, which is how we got them into the house. When we moved to cable, we went to 500 channels ultimately, and that's what I got over here, only 1,000 channels. But still, it's linear: 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and it's limited. It's also limited. As video begins to migrate to the internet, as it becomes digital, the number of channels are infinite. This is like the dot-com explosion in the 1990s. Anybody could launch a dot-com. Well, anyone can launch a digital television network now. All it really takes is an iPhone, really. I mean, you need content, but because it's nonlinear, you don't have to have things on all the time. You can put them up as you want. And what's the market? Who should be doing this? I did a live webcast on our VJ.com site this morning, and a couple of people asked, well, what kind of stuff should I do? And of course, what you should do is stuff that you're interested in. But the range of potential for nonlinear digital networks is virtually limitless. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. It's not a commercial example, but it's an example of what can be done. One of our longtime clients and people we like a lot, is the UNHCR, the United Nations Commissioner for High Commissioner for Refugees. And we started working with them, I think, 6 or 7 years ago, because they were very frustrated because they couldn't get their stuff on NBC or CBS. They kept trying to attract NBC to come to Darfur and do a story. So we said, let's just teach your people how to do this. And I think we've trained about 165 of their staff, and they all shoot with iPhones. They don't have cameras at all, and they all live there and they know the story. And so it used to be very easy to put together a network. It wouldn't be a commercial network, but very easy for them to say, screw NBC and screw CNN, and why should I wait for the BBC? I'm just going to do this myself. And so, you know, you can launch your own network all the time. I'm not really talking about blogging per se. I guess it is kind of like blogging in terms of people blogged and then they had text and then you had zines and stuff like that, and they bypassed printers with ink and paper, and you didn't have to go and sell your magazine to Condé Nast anymore. You could just launch your own online site. So what we're talking about is doing with video what happened 20 years ago with text. And the fact is that with iPhones and smartphones, stuff like that, you can shoot, you can edit, you can make your own stuff. But the real payoff to me, I mean, we've talked about making money here, is, and of course very few of them will work. It's like the dot-coms, but some of them are going to work. So if you wanted to make a pizza channel and you love pizza and that's all you're interested in, and all you did was shot videos of pizza and you had friends and you began to aggregate pizza makers from around the world and people who shot pizza, and you launched the pizza channel, my guess, I don't know, but my guess is that you could actually turn around the way the market is these days and sell that to one of these networks that's looking to aggregate stuff. Maybe the Food Network would buy your pizza channel. So I mean, reading the thing here and seeing how much money, you know, these guys at NBC, they're not stupid. They understand, they see what is going to happen. And of course, they're like driving a giant, you know, tanker, and they have to turn it slowly. But you can see they're investing $500 million here, $500 million here. You know, as they say, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking real money. But what they're buying is they are buying complete 100% online digital video networks that are in their incipient stages. And they all started like yesterday. Awesomeness TV didn't launch like 2 or 3 years ago, and that's already worth $800 million. And that's just a bunch of kids with video camera. I mean, I've seen it myself. Anybody could do this. So my advice, my very strong advice here is that if you're interested in doing this, get your iPhone out, start shooting and cutting your own video. Needless to say, come to the VJ.com and you know, learn how to do this properly, because you can't put junk up here. People spend their lives going to the movies and watching television, so the stuff has to be technically perfect. I see my friend Artie is also watching. Please tell him I said hello, says Larry Uden. Hello, Artie. Okay, so I did that. The fact is that the potential is in limitless here, and like the dot-com explosion of the 90s, there is going to be an online video explosion or bubble. And if I were you, I'm certainly going to try it, but if I were you, I would try and ride this thing to the max, and the potential is unlimited. So joinupforthevj.com. It wouldn't kill you for the $14.95 a month or $149.50 for the year. I put in my plug there. We all got a little business to run. But this is kind of thing that we're going to be dealing with more and more, because I can see now that finally the major corporations are starting to pay attention to this thing, and they are going to move to start to acquire. And if you want to really ride the bubble, or whatever you want to call it, I would get involved and I would get invested in this thing. And regardless of what business you're in, I think that to create a video analog of the business, to use analog in a funny way, has enormous potential, and it's not hard to do. So stick with us, and we're actually going to set up some lessons about how to launch your own network, because I think that's a hot topic to deal with. I'll talk to you later.